Your Excellencies, members of Ifimes Council, members of Ifimes, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Allow me to welcome you on behalf of the International Institute for Middle East and Balkan Studies, Ifimes from Ljubljana, the organizers of today's lecture by Mr. Wadia Abunassar, Director of International Center for Consultations, ICC, from Haifa, Israel, entitled The Israeli-Palestinian Conflict, Challenges and Opportunities, the Transformation of the Judiciary in Israel, Why and How. A special welcome and gratitude to go our guest, the acclaimed and highly respected Mr. Wadia Abunassar. Welcome to Institute Ifimes. I wish Mr. Abunassar pleasant stay in our wonderful country. We would like to thank the head of the Office of the Republic of Slovenia in Palestine, Mr. Vojko Kuzma, for his help in organizing this event. Wadia Abunassar is a director and founder of International Center for Consultations, ICC, from Haifa. In the Israeli, Palestinian, and foreign media, CNN, Al-Jazeera, etc., he appears as independent commentator and expert on situations in the Middle East. He is a member of Arab Christian community in Israel. In his lecture, Mr. Abunassar will present his views of the situations in Israel, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and transformation of judiciary in Israel. The lecture will be in English, followed by a discussion with the guest lecturer, moderated by myself, Zijad Bečirović, and Mr. Bakhtiar Alaf, directors of Ifimes. Spoštovani gospod Wadia Abunassar, Vaše ekscelencije, člani sveta, svetovalnega odbora in člani Mednarodnega inštituta Ifimes, dame in gospodje, spoštovani udeleženci današnjega dogodka in vsi, ki nas spremljate prek spleta. Dovolite mi, da vas najprej pozdravim in se zahvalim, da ste se odzvali našemu povabilu na današnji dogodek, predavanje direktorja Mednarodnega centra za konsultacije ICC Haifa Izrael z naslovom Izraelsko-palestinski konflikt pred izzivi in priložnostmi. Spremembe sodstva v Izraelu, zakaj in kako. Posebna dobrodošlica in zahvala gre našemu gostu, priznanem in zelo spoštovanem gospodu Wadiju Abunassarju. Dobrodošli na inštitutu Ifimes. Zahvaljujemo se vodji Urada Republike Slovenije v Palestini, gospodu Vojku Kuzmi, za pomoč pri izvedbi dogodka. Magister Wadia Abunassar je ustanovitelj in direktor Mednarodnega centra za konsultacije ICC iz Haife. V izraelskih, palestinskih in tujih medijih, CNN, Al-Jazeera in drugi, pa nastopa kot neodvisni komentator in odličen poznavalec razmer na Bližnjem vzhodu. Je pripadnik arabske krščanske skupnosti v Izraelu. V svojem predavanju bo gospod Wadia Abunassar predstavil situacijo v Izraelu, izraelsko-palestinski konflikt in spremembe sodstva v Izraelu. Predavanje bo v angleškem jeziku, sledila bo razprava z gostom, ki jo bosta vodila moja malenkost Zijad Bečirović in kolega Bakhtiar Alaf, oba direktora Ifimesa. Ahlan wa sahlan, Ustad Wadia. And now, Mr. Wadia Abunassar, the floor is yours.
I would like to thank you for taking the time to listen to me. It is a pleasure to be here. You know, I love your country. It is my 4th visit here. Today, I will talk allegedly on 2 different topics: the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the judicial reform or major changes in Israel. I will explain that things are somehow related and who might be the winners, who might be the losers, and how, despite everything, we shall have hope for some better future. Now, if to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I would like to highlight that despite many times people talk about Israel-Palestine, we have to highlight 2 facts. Fact 1, we are not talking about symmetric conflict. It is not 2 sides equal. It is occupier and occupied. So masters and slaves. So it is not equal. So we cannot expect from the 2 sides the same things. We cannot expect the Palestinians to make the same concessions that we expect from Israel. Because there is a fact, one side is very strong and one side is very weak. Even economically, the Israeli economy is 30 times, 30, the Palestinian economy. So, and we can talk about military power, security, etc. So it is unfair to treat the Israeli-Palestinian, and it is not only unfair, it is not wise to treat the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a conflict between two equal players. Because many times foreign players say, oh, Palestinians, you should do this, Israelis, you should do that, as if we are talking about equal partners, which is not the case. The second problem is that we are talking here about a fact that to the west of Jordan River, there are almost 8 million Jews and 8 million Arabs. And the Jews are deciding for the Arabs. The Arabs are not deciding. They maximum, some Arabs from Israel can vote in Israel, but our poor Palestinian brothers in the occupied West Bank and Gaza, they have no decision. They cannot decide if to have water supply without Israel's consent. Nothing could go to Gaza without Israel's consent. So it is a fact that the Jews are deciding for the Arabs. And this is not sustainable. It is not only that it is not fair, it could not last for a long time to come. It is against human logic. Now, at this stage, there are 4 major obstacles facing any solution on the Israeli-Palestinian track. And when I talk about solution, I mean serious solution. It is not to give the Palestinians some food. It is their right to get food. You know, I'm talking about the 5 core issues of the conflict: Jerusalem, refugees, water, settlements, and border. If you answer all these 5 questions, I can tell you there will be a Palestinian state or not. At this stage, Israel doesn't want to touch any of the 5 points. Israel wants to maintain what it believes to be a status quo. I don't believe that there is such creature. There is ongoing decline in the relationship, and there is growing hatred between Israelis and Palestinians. And this is bad for all, not only for the Palestinians, also for Israel. At this stage, there are 4 major obstacles facing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Obstacle 1, and I would like to be frank, is the leaders. Nowadays, I would like to speak regardless. You know, today in the Jerusalem Post, a journalist wrote that maybe Wadia Abunassar will speak differently in Ljubljana than he speaks in Israel or Palestine. I have no 2 languages, lady. I have 1 language. The leaders of Israel and Palestine are the biggest enemies of their peoples. And I summarize that in 1 sentence. I don't see any Israeli leader who has a peace plan for the Palestinians. And I don't see any Palestinian leader who has a serious liberation strategy for his people. So without liberation strategy at the Palestinian side, and without readiness for peace at the Israeli side, we are on maintenance. This will give no hope, but further suffering for everybody. The second challenge is the lack of sufficient understanding. You know, Israelis and Jews and Arabs know a lot about each other, but they understand very little. You know, I keep joking, you know, I'm married with my wife 25 years. I don't remember agreeing, but we have sets of understanding. This maintains the business at home. So sometimes she makes concessions, most of the time I make, but what to do? This is life. So Israelis and Arabs, until now, 75 years since the creation of Israel, There is a lot of information, but no understanding. Because if there was understanding, you know, many times I ask Israeli officials, there are 2 million Palestinians in Gaza living in a big prison. Convince me, what is this good for Israel? What? I want to accept how this is helping Israel. So therefore, but on the other hand, our Palestinian friends also don't understand that despite 75 years of Israel's existence, many Jews continue to live in fear. If I will go tomorrow in Tel Aviv screaming Allahu Akbar in the streets, people will run like rabbits. So I believe that people are still living in fear. So, and therefore, the lack of mutual understanding negatively affect the chances for reconciliation. Because if I don't understand my neighbor doesn't understand me, the chances for problems are high. The third challenge, and allow me again to be frank, is our friends in the international community. Mainly our American friends, but partially also our European friends. Maybe not the Slovenes, but the international community is part of the problem, not of the solution. First, because they are expecting from the Palestinians almost what they expect from Israel, and we say that the conflict is asymmetric. And second, because many international players, especially the Americans, want the Palestinians, especially the Palestinian Authority, to remain a kind of subcontractor of Israel. That your role is to be mercenary, to arrest Muhammad, to bring Mahmoud, but not to give the people hope for a better future. This is bad for Israel and also bad to the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority credibility now is under very big question mark, partially because of the lack of political support from the international community. The fourth point is the marginalization of the Palestinian cause. And by the way, not only by Americans and Europeans, but even by our Muslim and Arab brothers and sisters. You know, if until the late 90s, Israel-Palestine conflict was on the top of the agenda, in the last 10 years it has been marginalized. Not only because of what is happening in the world. You know, the war in Ukraine is something new. The corona is something new. You know, there are shifts in the Middle East that marginalized the Palestinian issue, and now people became busy in many other issues, and this practically paved the ground for some Muslim and Arab players to bypass the Palestinians. You see, Chad, Sudan, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Morocco, they normalized their ties with Israel without preconditioning such normalization with improvement at the Palestinian track. So therefore, the Palestinian issue lost from its significance. Now, despite this reality, we are ending in a quite of very sad situation on the ground. Nowadays, most Israelis, Jews, believe in 1+2. One sovereign state between Jordan River and Mediterranean with two Palestinian subcontractors, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. They treat them as employees. And the most important for Israel are two things. First, not to deploy Israeli military there, because it is very dangerous, because every day this would end with killed Israeli soldiers. And second, to save money, because if we will occupy, there will be no European funding. So we will keep the PA there. So Slovenia, EU, America will pay, and why not? So they will beautify our occupation. On the other hand, our Palestinian friends are dreaming, not necessarily working, about the one-state solution. They sleep and dream. We want to come back to Haifa, to Jaffa. They are dreaming. But between dream and reality, I don't know what they do. Anyhow, so what is sure is that this reality is not sustainable. It could not last for long, especially now with the emerge of young generation. I will stop here and I will come to this Israeli-Palestinian topic. Soon I will move to the Israeli crisis. Nowadays, I don't know if you are following, but in Israel there is major crisis. This evening, Prime Minister Netanyahu might deliver a speech about the fate of the so-called judicial reform. Now, the terminology reform is misleading because reform is a nice thing. But if you read in depth in the legislation that Netanyahu wants to advance and his company, the right-wing partners, it is practically changing the character of the state. You know, I would like to highlight that in the Middle East, there are no countries, there are regimes. The only place which we have semi-country is Israel. Now the whole problem is Netanyahu wants to transform it from a country to a regime. I have to explain something more. In Israel political system, when there are Knesset elections and a coalition is formed, the government has automatic majority in the parliament. So the parliament is becoming what we call it elastic stamp in the hand of the government because they have automatic majority there. So the only remaining serious barking dog was the court. And now what Netanyahu wants to do is to silence the court. As simple as that. Of course, I can go into details if you wish. I'm ready to answer details about different legislation, but this is the concept. The concept is to transform the limited Israeli democracy, because Israel is not liberal democracy. In Israel, there is partial democracy. In the top, there is the Ashkenazi secular Jewish man, and in the bottom, the Arab Muslim veiled woman. It is not really egalitarian democracy. So we are facing now an existential threat to the partial Israeli democracy. The problem now that Netanyahu is perceived by many as the main threat to Israel. Some people believe that Iran is a challenge, some Muslim prayers are a challenge. It might be true. But if the country now internally is in a big earthquake, it broadcasts weakness. And this was the main reason that Defense Minister Yoav Gallant went out and say, Mr. Prime Minister, you are putting at risk the strategic interests of the state. And it was not only him. It is not Gallant who became brilliant suddenly. It is the leaders of and the commanders of the Israeli security establishment who have been warning, mainly, again, I can go into a lot of details, but mainly from two main points. Point one, that the ongoing crisis in Israel is broadcasting weakness, and different enemies might challenge us. Second, if we will become less democratic, Israeli officers might be taken to trial in the International Criminal Court. So far, this didn't happen because the international community had some respect to the Israeli judiciary. But if in Europe, in the United States, we'll say, oh, the Israeli court is not independent anymore, we have to sue the Israeli soldiers for committing war crimes against Palestinians. So this might create a huge problem to the Israeli security systems internationally. So therefore, nowadays, there is a push in that. Now, we have to look a bit in depth. Nowadays, Netanyahu is like a man whose fig leaves, you know, the fig leaves, when Adam and Eve ate the apple or the fruit from the forbidden tree, they realized that they naked. So they brought a fig leaf and covered their sensitive areas. So fig leaf is a term to cover embarrassing things. Nowadays, Netanyahu's fig leaves are dropping apart. The biggest fig leaf is America. The United States now, I tell you, the real war or the main war of Netanyahu now is against Biden. Biden, for the first time in many years, Israeli Prime Minister is not invited to Washington. And the Biden administration doesn't subscribe to Netanyahu's stories. And the Americans are very clear that these alleged reforms, that for some people they call it regime change, it is very risky to Israel and to our bilateral relations. Similarly, it's happening here in Europe, especially with major players. We saw Netanyahu visiting Berlin. We saw Netanyahu visiting London. And instead of having Iran as the main topic became Israel judicial challenges. So instead of Netanyahu being on offensive, he was on defensive. So now, even Israel's best friends are finding themselves very embarrassed. Another fig leaf which is dropping around are the moderate Arab regimes. Jordan, Egypt, the Palestinian Authority. These players are getting nothing from Israel. They make peace, and instead of appreciating that, instead of boosting the Palestinian process, Netanyahu is allowing radical Jews to play some dirty games in Jerusalem, sometimes even in Al-Aqsa, around Al-Aqsa. There is sharp increase in number of settlers who were allowed into Al-Aqsa compound. So this is like insulting to moderate Arab players. So instead of behaving as true friend, these Arab players are preferring now not to support Netanyahu, to sit aside and to watch. Another fig leaf is Netanyahu doesn't have now left-wing partners. In previous governments, he used to have some leftists to defend him vis-a-vis the Arabs. You know, Benny Gantz was going to the Arabs, please be patient, wait, you know, things will change, etc. Now, it is not there. On the contrary, he has some players, especially Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who every second day cause a problem. Once with a map, once with visiting Al-Aqsa, once with a statement, once with taking measures against the Palestinian radio. So instead of improving or even maintaining good ties with traditional friends like Jordan, Egypt, and Palestinian Authority, the ties are going down. Another fig leaf is that here what I call it the passive fig leaf. The Palestinians in Israel, some people call them Israeli Arabs. We are Palestinians. We didn't come from the moon. We are Palestinians, but we are with Israeli citizenship. We are now sitting at the edge. So the vast majority of Palestinians believe that it is better not to interrupt the party in Tel Aviv. Some people believe that if we will be there, this might be used by the right wing to say, oh, the Arabs are supporting the left wing. So now the dominant approach is to wait and see. So now Netanyahu is practically ending with a very, very limited excuse. Now, how things are linked together? The fact that Israel is paralyzed affects negatively the chances for peace process with the Palestinians anytime soon. So therefore, nowadays, because of the internal crisis in Israel, unfortunately, if until few months ago some people were thinking we have to resume the peace process, now nobody is seriously talking about this option because it is disconnected from reality. Despite that, I believe, and despite all the challenges, by the way, there are now two big challenges. Israel and Palestine are collapsing nations. I'm very concerned. Israel is facing internal turmoil, and we have tribalism. So, you know, the Israeli society is more and more a society of tribes, even among the Jews themselves. And among Palestinians, we are also a nation of tribes. We have the West Bank, we have Gaza, Jerusalem, Israel, and diaspora. Once the PLO was a glue unifying, but now, unfortunately, this glue is almost fading away. Nevertheless, I believe that there are opportunities. We shall not lose hope. The opportunities could be reflected in two ways. First way is, now many times, since the morning I was meeting some officials here, people are asking me, elections in Palestine, elections in Palestine. No, why not? But I say, in order to have elections, you have first to have independence. Because elections, fair elections, could not happen under occupation. Even if these elections will take place, there will be many fingers. Now even when we are talking about sovereign state, there are sometimes some fingers. So imagine when we talk about occupied, especially if Gaza will remain under Hamas. So this is an issue that has to be for reflection. But above all, our European and American friends have to sign a commitment. You want elections? Fine. But you have to accept the election results. You cannot sue the elections as you want. In Europe, you want elections. In the Middle East, you want selection. You want to decide who you want to be elected. We are not a flock of cows, my friends. The Palestinians are a nation. They have right to choose whoever they want. It's not that I'm in favor of Hamas or X or Y. But the Palestinians have the right to select whoever or to elect whoever they want. So if you want elections, you have to accept the results. You see, I don't see the international community accepting the results. And nowadays, it is not of a secret. If Fatah will run alone in elections, it will lose. So the chances for Fatah to win, because it has nothing to offer. Nothing to offer. Zero achievements in the last years. Now, on the other hand, in Israel, unfortunately, this kind of mess might prevail for a long time, regardless what Netanyahu will say or will not say tonight. So, in order to have opportunities, we have to find a transition in Palestine that could be somehow accepted, either by international commitment for free elections and to accept its results regardless what will be the results. And we need a serious demand from Israel for commitment to respect these results. It is not enough that the international community to accept and Israel doesn't. So at this stage, I don't see that happening. However, my humble vision, Netanyahu now is in front of three options. Option one is Netanyahu to stay as Netanyahu, to fool everybody. And if he has nobody to fool, he fools himself. So option two is to be hostage of his coalition partners. Option three, what I suggest, Netanyahu has two neighbors, Bashar Assad of Syria and Mahmoud Abbas. By the way, I wish President Abbas long and healthy life. He celebrated yesterday his 88th birthday. So, but anyhow, I believe that it is maybe time to relax, maybe in Slovenia. Anyhow, so to make things short, I believe that it is very important to try to use the opportunity of having these leaders for making a possible deal. I believe deals could be done. Netanyahu, if he wants, he is strong enough. If I were Netanyahu, I will make negotiations, probably secret negotiations, with the Palestinians and or with the Syrians. We'll make deal. With this deal, I will run to elections. Believe me, I'm ready to forgive him for all the cigars he smoked, and even to bring him a new packet of Cuban cigars as a gift. But I believe there is the opportunity. There is also opportunity at the Palestinian side that Abbas still is the convening power. It means he is like the Papa. It is important to prepare the ground for transition. Transition, it means reconciliation with Hamas. If we wish or not, Hamas is a player. We cannot talk about unified Palestine without Hamas. This is a fact. So reconciliation could be done if there is a will. So far, I don't see there is a will. And second, to allow more of the young Palestinian leaders to take their role. Nowadays, the average age in Fatah Central Committee is maybe 75, and they are talking about some people in Fatah Youth Movement are 50 plus. So good for them. So what I'm trying to conclude, things are looking bad in Israel and Palestine. But if there is a will, there is the way. And I believe also small nations like Slovenia can play differently. Many times our European friends believe like our Israeli friends. Israel believe what doesn't come with force comes with more force. But you have been killing Palestinians for 70 years, and young Palestinians continue to fight, which means that force is not the solution. On the other hand, our European friends have been giving the Palestinians the largest amount of aid per capita in history. But there are two facts. Fact one, no horizon for independence. And fact two, most Palestinians are poorer than ever. So the money of European taxpayers is vanishing in the pocket of occupiers and of crooks. So this is an issue that our European friends have to reflect upon. However, I believe that there are different ways to look at things, including small countries, if reflecting how to work with women, how to work with youth, how to work with clergy, how to work with the different components of the two societies. Israel has 5 important components: the religious leaders, the ex-generals, the mayors, the journalists, the business community. We have to work not only with politicians. I'm not sure that politicians want peace. And now in Israel and Palestine, we have mainly politicians. I don't see real statesmen. The difference between politician and a statesman, as Clemenceau once said, a politician thinks about the next election. A statesman thinks about the next generation. I am thinking about the next generation. I believe that despite the fact that things are looking bleak, even if there is no hope, we have to create it. This is the way for salvation, for Israel, for Palestine, for every man of goodwill. Thank you very much, and I'm all ears to hear your questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Abunassar. Now I would like to ask colleague Bakhtiar Alaf to start with this discussion.
You mentioned the crisis in Israel regarding this mass protest, and yesterday he sacked the Defense Minister Gallant. Do you think that will come to polarization inside the Likud party?
Yes, there are some signs that in the Likud party there are some kind of fragmentation. It is still in its early stages, but there are already, we have to look not at the party only in the Knesset. You know, I give you two levels of information. In the Knesset, in the parliament, there are already two Knesset members, Yuli Edelstein and David Bitan, who clearly announced support to Yoav Gallant. But it is not only there. Today, Haim Bibas is the mayor of Modi'in. It is to east of Tel Aviv. And he is the chief of the Union of Israeli Mayors. And he is a prominent Likud leader. Haim Bibas announced that the Union of Mayors are joining the strike. Also today, at Ben Gurion Airport, the head of the labor union there is a Likud guy. But he announced joining the strike. So what I'm trying to tell you, there are several Likud people, not to talk about veteran Likud people, like former ministers Limor Livnat and Dan Meridor, who went publicly already few months ago saying Netanyahu is threatening Israel. So I'm smelling like a crisis in the Likud. I don't see this going into big crisis. Why? Netanyahu is still in control of the party. You know, I tell you, Netanyahu and Mahmoud Abbas, they abducted not only their nations, but also their parties. You know, if under the great Arafat, there were inside Fatah streams, under Mahmoud Abbas, there is no streams anymore in Fatah. The president decides everything. The same in the Likud. Netanyahu decides, and when he was young, Netanyahu was making troubles to Ariel Sharon, to Yitzhak Shamir. But now, he silenced the opposition. However, I believe if this dispute will continue, I am sorry for my expression, but more rabbits will come out from the party.
Next question is, how about the opposition with Mr. Lapid? Can he to form a government now, to form a coalition with 61 members? Is this possible now?
Look, mathematically it is possible, because if one of the ultra-Orthodox parties will join, it is possible. But practically it is almost mission impossible. In order that Lapid to have an alternative government without going to elections, we need to have what we call it two miracles. Either a big split in the Likud, that 7 or more Knesset members from the Likud will split and join, or one of the Orthodox parties will join. At this stage, we don't see that happening.
In case of a new elections, we must be ready for that. Is there any possibility of uniting of the Arab parties in Israel to be one coalition?
Look, it is very sad, but the answer is no. Look, again, my humble approach is that there is no necessarily to be unified, but it is important at least to be in coordination. You know, sometimes we don't agree because there are Islamists, there are communists, there are Arabists. I understand that there are some differences, but many times, like nowadays, unfortunately, we have a personal dimension. The dispute is becoming also personal. People even don't talk to each other. I think it is wrong. My humble hope, and you know, I hope that I know that also different players are working in order at least to minimize the personal disputes and to try to create some better coordination among the various Arab parties. I'm skeptical, but let us hope that things would change. By the way, I want to tell you something. It is, if the Balad party, the Arab Nationalist Party, if it passed the threshold, Netanyahu wouldn't have government today. So what we are talking about, that sometimes it is a matter, or if merits, the poor merits lost the elections with a gap of 5,000 votes only. And I will tell you an additional piece of information. If you analyze those who didn't vote, and we try to analyze from where they are, because we knew what was the percentage of voters in X and Y cities. So when we know that 70% voted in Haifa, so it means 30 didn't vote. So when you analyze deeply, 80% of those who didn't vote were anti-Netanyahu. But it is, in my humble opinion, it is a mistake. But you know, in politics, sometimes your rival use their mistakes. Like in football, you know, sometimes if you are a bad team, the other side is making scores, not because they are smart, but because you are not performing.
The next question is about President Mahmoud Abbas. You mentioned that he celebrated his 88th of birthday yesterday, I think.
Yes.
And who can to replace him? Who is the alternative inside the PLO?
Well, I believe that the Palestinian people, a people of 12 million, if not more people, has a lot of brilliant people. You know, every people, I don't believe that there is somebody who is irreplaceable. You know, history is full of people who thought that they are irreplaceable. So starting from great leaders, ending with minor politicians. My humble suggestion at this stage, that Palestine needs a trio to transform. I suggest, you know, until now, President Abbas and President Arafat were practically one-man show. I suggest now that to move to a trio, to have somebody from Hamas, probably Khalid Mash'al, in charge of the PLO, dealing with Palestinians in the diaspora. And if they are big hero, I want them to give food to our brothers in Lebanon, in the refugee camps. Second, Marwan Barghouti is in Israeli jail. He is the most popular Palestinian personality nowadays. If you would ask me, I believe Israel, if they want, there is the way. Although that he is sentenced for several life terms, but if the Israeli security establishment recommends and the government accepts, the president will pardon him. Third, I believe Salam Fayyad was one of the few Palestinian leaders who knew what he wanted. You know, many of us Palestinians, especially politicians, we know what we don't want. We don't want Israeli occupation. But many times we don't know what we want. What Palestinian state we want? Democratic, not democratic? If you ask me, I would prefer that a state led by women, and we will make business. We are bad in politics as men. But you know, I wrote my thesis about that. I once even told Arafat and he kicked me out. So I said, there will be no Palestine unless a Palestinian woman will lead us. We Palestinian men are paka. We speak a lot, we work a little. But anyhow, my humble vision is that this trio, Khalid Mash'al, Marwan Barghouti, and Salam Fayyad, who is excellent administrator, to transform the Palestinian people from tribalism back to a nation, to give hope to the people. This is doable, not mission impossible, with some pressures, but at this stage, unfortunately, I don't see Israeli partner for this scenario.
My next question is about the holy place in the Holy Land, because we are now in Ramadan and we are waiting the Passover for Christians, Passover for the Jewish people also. What do you think about the purpose of 2 Knesset members to banning the spreading Christianity in Israel?
Look, I want to be frank with you. You are putting now, the finger on one of my wounds, being a Palestinian Christian. I just today wrote a paper, Are Christians Targeted in Israel? Since the beginning of the year, 5 incidents targeted Christians in Jerusalem, and in the last 2 weeks, 4 incidents in Nazareth. Not to talk about also this bill. Look, this bill aims practically, in my humble information, mainly against transforming Jews to Christianity. And by the way, I have to tell you, among Jews, there are different messianic movements who are converting. By the way, welcome. So, but this is not. So what I'm trying to say, it is the right of every human being to choose his faith. Imagine that there will be such a law against converting to Judaism in Slovenia. There will be a big earthquake. So what I'm trying to say, although this law is not necessarily directed against Christians in Israel, we fear that this might be used also against Christians in Israel. Furthermore, about attacks on Christians, I would like to share with you the following information. Since 2015, there are more than 130 attacks, mostly committed by radical right-wing Jews. In the old city of Jerusalem, there are almost daily bases of spitting on monks, especially in the Armenian quarter. In 95% of the cases, the police did almost nothing. First, they have difficulty finding the perpetrators. But the city, if you were in Jerusalem, the holy city of Jerusalem, the Israelis filled it with cameras, And many times churches offer images, offer videos. Oh, we don't find him. The second, even if found, many times he is mentally ill. So why mentally ill people are around, And why mentally ill people are attacking only Christians? So third, even if people are arrested, etc., in the Israeli system, it is the police who indicts, who tell the prosecution. Many times, the indictment is a kind of what I call it very bad joke. It is like if you are telling the court, please release him. But it means you say, oh, he did something, but, it is no sufficient evidence, we are recommending that he might be sent to some treatment, etc. So in the vast majority of cases, unfortunately, ended with no deterrence. Last but not least, I would like to tell you that there are rabbis who are inciting against others. If you don't need me, but Google a book called Torat HaMelech, the King's Torah. It is full of incitement against non-Jews. And authors of this book are still around. You know, if you go to many yeshivas, there are some incitement. I say any inciter, and I insist, any inciter, Muslim, Christian, a Jew, shall be treated equally and shall be questioned, if not bring to trial also. Because sometimes inciters, maybe they don't tell someone go and attack, but it is enough, we call it to preach poison. You know, when you are making poison in the air, so some youngsters might be poisoned. So in my humble opinion, inciters are not less dangerous than perpetrators, and they have to be treated.
My last question is about the policy of Vatican toward this crisis. We know, I think, it's declared, but now the policy of Vatican toward the Arab Christians in Israel. As I know that the head of the Catholic Church is no more Palestinian after Michel Sabah. We have now another one from Italy, I think. Before that, the administrator was Mr. Battista, Monsignor Battista. Do you think it's changing of the policy of Vatican toward the Holy Land and toward the Arab Christians?
Well, it depends how you look at it. Let me be frank, you know. No doubt that for the Holy See, they have their own sensitivity dealing with Israel. Because of the Holocaust, there is huge misunderstanding and dispute. Of course, there were many steps towards reconciliation, but still, until this day, there are some sensitivities between the Holy See and the Jewish people about who did what during the Holocaust. And I believe this sensitivity affects negatively the capability of the Vatican, of the Holy See, to play a major role in the Holy Land. Now, on the other hand, it is true that nowadays there is an Italian patriarch for the Roman Catholic Church, but there are also some local bishops. You know, the Melkai Church in Israel, we have a young guy called Archbishop Yusuf Matta. In the Anglican Church, we have also a Palestinian from the Galilee, Hussam Naum. And, you know, from my humble experience, sometimes non-Arabs care for the people not less than Arabs. So I say in the church, the most important is to be a pastor. A pastor, it means to love your flock and to care for it. Nowadays, it is not a secret that we have a challenge, not regardless to the ethnicity. If you are an Arab, if you are, and by the way, it is valid in all clergy, Muslims, Jews, that sometimes, unfortunately, pastors are becoming like a job, not a vocation. You know, to be a pastor, it is like a message, you know, and this is a big challenge. However, I believe, again, that Patriarch Pizzaballa is trying. Some people are maybe a little bit not happy, but it is difficult to appease everybody. But I believe that there are some efforts by church leaders. In my humble opinion, there could be more efforts. But I believe also, to be frank, and you know, a month ago, I launched a conference in Haifa, my hometown, with tens of Christian friends, to think that it is not only, again, many times, we Palestinians in general, Palestinian Christians in specific, we are crying nation. We want others to help us. But we have to learn how to say mea culpa. It means I have to help myself. I don't have to expect the Vatican to help me, or the Pope to help me, or the Patriarch to help me. Especially in Israel, the majority of the Christian community are middle class. We cannot talk about real poverty. So if there is a will, you know, many things could be done.
My last question, we are in religion again, regarding the Muslim holy place in Jerusalem. As you know, that Jordan is patronizing this, but we have some competition. Some analysts are talking about Saudi Arabia to replace this, but after the normalization of the diplomatic relation or between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Can Saudi Arabia to be alternative for Jordan here in Jerusalem? We have the agreement of 1994, also peace agreement with Jordan.
Yes. Look, I doubt that Saudis could be an alternative for three main reasons. First, there is an agreement between Israel and Jordan. Second, Jordan has historical ties with Al-Haram al-Sharif, Al-Aqsa compound. By the way, we have to distinguish because sometimes people don't, some radical Jewish friends are saying, oh, we have no problems that Muslims to pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque. But okay, Al-Aqsa Mosque is not only the mosque, it is the entire 144 dunam compound. You see? Because some Jews are thinking about sharing the place. So this is a very, very delicate matter. And sometimes people from abroad don't understand this sensitivity. You see? Oh, we don't want to pray in the mosque. Of course, they don't want to pray in the mosque, but inside the compound, yes, and they are praying. By the way, in contrast to agreements and understandings with Jordan. The other point that I would like to highlight, the whole issue of Saudi or sometimes Moroccan, etc., it is more a political game. By the way, sometimes it was played by the Palestinians. When Arafat had problems with King Hussein, he went to King of Morocco and agreed in the Muslim summit, oh, Morocco is responsible for Jerusalem Committee. The same now our Israeli friends. They are playing now the Saudi against the Jordanian. I doubt that the Saudis are interested to play against the Jordanians. It is mostly Israeli leaks, but still, I believe that regardless to this, Jordan is facing a growing challenge. Why? Because except of paying the waqf, the Muslim waqf in Al-Haram, there is a decline in the respect, not only to Jordan, but as I said, to all moderate Arab players among Palestinians. And this is creating a vacuum which allows different kind of radical players to be present inside Al-Haram.
Now, please, your question. Who have any question for our guest? Mr. Branko Soban.
Short question. Where is heading Israel now under Netanyahu? David Grossman is writing that Israel is heading toward fascism. What's your opinion about this?
I'm not far from David Grossman. Look, it is not only fascism. Look, I have been talking to many Israeli friends, especially in the right wing. I always say a wise man learns from the experience of others, doesn't wait to be heard himself in order to learn. Sparta lived for 150 years. Athens lived for 800 years. No country in the world will live till eternity. But there is a difference between the culture of power of Sparta and the power of culture of Athens. Israel at this stage is similar more to Sparta. It is bad to Israel. You see, it is on a kind of decline. And this might cause great damage. You know what? I don't want to talk, God forbids, about people being hurt. I believe that violence is a matter of time. But even if I want to be optimist, look at what's happening now in the economy. Do you know what are the losses? Billions, billions and billions. And it will not be paid. Netanyahu will have his salary, I can assure you, no problem about his salary. He will get 15,000 euros per month and he will be happy in addition to some gifts from here and there. Good for him. So What I'm trying to say that the ordinary people will pay the price. We will have less money for education, less money for health. We will pay the price. We already paying heavy price for the settlement policies. You know how much the government is dedicating to settlements? On the account, you know, the settlers are less than 5% of the population, while ordinary Israelis, mainly Arabs, 55% of Arabs live below poverty line. And Arabs are 20% of the population, but 40% of the criminals. Why is that? Do you think because Arabs are criminals? It is not by genes. So what I'm trying to say that the country is already paying heavy price. Yesterday, the 39th Arab was killed since the beginning of the year in crimes in Israel. And we are still in March. You know, what I'm trying to tell you, this is insane. Insane. And many people are paying the price. But unfortunately, it is ordinary citizen. Who cares?
Please, Professor.
Professor Dr. Nisartachi.
At the very beginning, you mentioned that there are 5 issues that they need to be agreed on or need to be resolved in order for some kind of settlement to take place. Water, border, and so on. Can you talk about why? And you said Israel will never agree to any of those. Can you talk about those 5 and why they wouldn't? What the issue is with all the issues?
Well, as I said, there are 5 issues of dispute. I was saying that Netanyahu will not agree. You know, I believe that if there will be wise Israeli leader, would agree to a formula. But Jerusalem, for most Jews, they want it to be under Israel control. When it is under Israel control, no Palestinian will agree for any deal. Because for all Palestinians, Jerusalem, we call it in Arabic, Durrat al-Taj. It is the top of the crown. You know, we cannot have a state without Jerusalem. You see? So, but I believe there could be some solutions in Jerusalem. And in the year 2000, I remember, there were some serious talks about finding formulas. By the way, I'm a political scientist. I believe when there is the will, there is the way. At this stage, there is no will. But if there is a will, we are creative enough to find solutions. The second problem is water resources. You know, Israel controls the water resources in the West Bank. And the Palestinians, you know, water is an essential element needed for living. And the Palestinians, you know, if you visit the West Bank, in most Palestinian homes, you would find huge black cans. Why? Because they don't have always running water. It is insane in the 21st century. While settlers have swimming pool few kilometers from Nablus, a man from Nablus have to put cans on his rooftop in order to guarantee ongoing water supply. So there is unfair share of the water. Third, refugees. This is an explosive matter. In Israel, if you are today in Slovenia and you decide to be a Jew, next week you can come to Israel and ask to be citizen and you will get citizenship. Regardless, because you suddenly became a Jew. But if a Palestinian left his home in Jaffa, in Haifa, by the way, most of them left not willingly. These guys are not allowed back. So this is unfair, unjust. We are talking about majority of Palestinians who are refugees. Many of them are in the occupied territories, but many of them are also beyond. And there is a need for solution. And this solution, it's not only to allow them back, but even if you want to compensate them, who will pay? Israel wants the Arabs to pay. And we are talking here about billions in compensation. The fourth problem is the settlements. The settlements nowadays are grabbing almost 1/3 of the lands in the occupied West Bank. Of course, I'm not talking about the occupied Golan Heights. This is another story. But how to evacuate those? We are talking about 500,000 settlers inside the West Bank. You know, when Egypt made peace with Israel, Israel had one settlement in Sinai, Yamid. And there was a huge crisis in Israel to evacuate one settlement. In 2005, Sharon evacuated 4 settlements in the West Bank. Until now, he is blamed to be the great devil by the Israeli right wing. So imagine when you want to evacuate hundreds of settlements. It is a huge challenge. But to keep them means no Palestinian state, because no viability, you see. Now, if to talk about the border, where are the borders of Palestine? Will Palestine enjoy real sovereignty, or will be under, because what Netanyahu wants, he wants to allow the Palestinians to have an entity, but not sovereignty. You see? But who would accept to be slave of his neighbor? This is not sustainable. And therefore, these issues, without being solved, we cannot talk about the existence of a Palestinian state. Now, for most Palestinians nowadays, they are on surrendering mode. Okay, the Jews don't want, no problem. We will bring children. And we are entering now apartheid era. It will not be pleasant, but at the end, we will impose one-state solution. I'm not sure that this will happen. This would lead to further bloodshed.
Do you have any question? More?